Hi, it's Dr. Bette Robin with the Dentistry Rising podcast. You might know me as a dental practice sale broker from Orange County, California. I am a dentist as well as an attorney and broker, and it's my goal at this point to help you get where you want to go with your practices, to help inspire you, lead you in the right direction, and motivate you. So happy listening. Happy New Year! I want to really help you guys a lot this year in trying to get where you want to go. Let's start this straight talk with the topic of 3 ways to pick the right practice for you. I'm going to narrow it down to my top 3 ways. And why? Because buying a practice is really a huge financial decision. It's really the most important financial decision you'll make in your career. Next is picking your spouse, which is probably number 1, although I didn't know that long time ago when I picked a spouse. Oh well, live and learn. So buying a practice is such a big decision, way bigger than a house, and I want to help you guys through it. Buying a practice is kind of like a marriage, much more so than buying a house, because it can be very hard to get it out of once you get into it. At least if you try to get out soon, it can be really hard without losing a lot of money. Why? Because someone doesn't want to buy your mistakes. If you signed on the dotted line for a very expensive lease or a long lease, someone's not usually very willing to take on this burden for you. Or if you bought a lot of expensive equipment, same deal. Once you drive that car off the lot, it depreciates quite a bit. And if all the patients and most of the staff have left because they didn't like your new policies or, whatever else, what do you have to sell? So let's talk about the 3 most important qualities I think your right practice needs to have. Number 1, profitability. I know I harp on this, but it just needs to make money. It needs to make money now, today, and every day for about the last 20 years. And it needs to make money for you 20, 30 years forward every single day. It needs to be a very hardworking practice. It needs to pay your bills, pay your student loans. It needs to take you out to eat. It needs to take you shopping. It needs to pay your skiing or whatever else you like to do. It needs to take care of you. And it shouldn't just sort of make money. I was shocked yesterday when I was talking to someone who was considering buying a smaller practice. I asked him if the practice was profitable. Although given the gross, he told me, I knew the answer. He said it sort of makes money. I mean, is that kind of like being sort of pregnant? Either you are or you're not. And either a practice is profitable or it isn't. The question to ask here, the most important question in my opinion, is does the practice make enough money not only to pay for itself, but to fund all of your lifestyle? If you can't pass go on this number 1 criteria, it's a red light for me. Stop. Keep looking. Number 2, after we get past the fact the practice needs to be profitable, now the fun begins. You have to also be able to pay the right price, get the right terms, and negotiate the right transition. People ask me all the time, what's the right price to pay for this or that practice? I mean, how do I know? There's no easy answer with a lot of documents and a lot of specifics. It's like asking what's the right price to pay for a house. I saw a house on TMZ in Malibu last week that sold for $20 million. Got to keep up with that celebrity gossip. It was only about 4,000 square feet, and that's about the size of my house. But my house in Tustin isn't worth, a tenth of that. And if my house or that Malibu house was in a remote area, the price would be a fraction of that. And that can be how it is with practices too. Location is really important as well as our many other things. But for those of you who really want some guidelines, here they are. I'm talking Southern California because that's where I am. I'm talking a practice in a great location that's profitable, and everything else, let me stress that, everything else is lined up correctly. Those kind of practices should sell somewhere between 80 and 85% of their collections. You guys can try to skip over the laundry list of things that need to be right, but they have to be there. Everything has to line up correctly to get that kind of price. We'll go over that kind of laundry list another day. For a specialty practice, they almost always sell for 20-25% less than the good general practice. And smaller practices may sell for half, as may practices in remote locations. I've had many a discussion where a seller in the desert or some other remote area argues that his practice is worth the same as a practice looking at the water in Newport. It just isn't so. Not to say that living in more remote locations doesn't have a ton of benefits, and you probably made a ton of money along the way, but it isn't looking at the water. It doesn't have the appeal of practices that do, and like houses, when it comes time to sell, your practice is just not worth as much in a remote location, or if it's smaller. And not as much can be a lot, by like a third or a half. Okay, right terms. Right terms to me always includes a full array of covenants, not just a covenant not to compete. You need 8 to 10 covenants, like a covenant not to solicit patients, covenant not to solicit referrals, covenant not to solicit employees, covenant not to hire employees, and the list goes on. You also need a proper retreatment clause. It needs to be very clear as to whose problem a retreatment is. And third, you also need a good, mutually agreed upon purchase price allocation. This is usually much more important to a seller than to a buyer, but not always. Both parties should clearly understand the implications. And you need the right transition. Now, I'm certainly not saying that every practice needs an extensive transition, and I think most do not. But I am saying that I think no transition at all is usually a mistake. Somewhere in the middle is usually the answer. And somewhere in the middle might mean a week or 2 or a month. Sometimes it means 3 months, but usually it doesn't mean more. But taking the money and running and not doing any transition is almost always a bad idea. Now, I know a lot of you buyers are extremely confident, but even still, you do want at least a week or so where the seller can show you all the ropes. Okay, lastly, number 3, your right practice needs to fit you. To fit you, in my opinion, means, does the seller do the kind of dentistry you currently know how to do? Emphasis on the word currently. If the seller places a lot of implants and you've never placed an implant, no, it is not the right practice for you. Yes, you can learn, but everything has a learning curve, and it'll probably take you a couple years to get as confident in doing a lot of implants. And there are more gray area examples too. Does the seller do primarily full mouth cases? These are not easy and may take 5-10 years to learn to do correctly. And not only that, you need to develop a reputation and referral network that actually refers you patients to do this kind of work. This can be a scary practice to buy unless you're a prosthodontist or you really know what you're doing and have been doing it. Second, is the practice close to your house, or will you immediately move within 10 miles of the practice? I know you can drive, but after a while, you just don't want to. I am definitely an advocate of buying a practice before you buy your house. I mean, your practice is your money machine, and you always want to live close to your money machine so you can watch carefully over it. And does the patient base fit you? Are they your peeps? Do you fit in the community? Do you fit with the patients and the staff? Could some of the patients turn into your best friends? I mean, if you don't connect with your patients for whatever reason, they aren't going to buy your dentistry. Plain and simple. If someone doesn't really like you or feel like you like them and are like them, the chances of them doing business with you when there's so many other options around are slim. I don't think you can underestimate how much patients and staff liking you matters. It is huge. I mean, I don't go to a hairdresser I don't like, or a massage person, or a nail person, and I'm sure you don't either. The only time we tolerate using a service professional, as dentists are, that we don't necessarily connect with is there's no other option. And that certainly is not the case for a dental practice. So in summary, I think the top 3 things you must pay the most attention to when looking for a right practice for you are: number 1, profitability. Number 2, getting the right price, right terms, and a right transition. And number 3, a practice that is the right fit for you. Okay, thank you. Tell me what you're thinking. My email is drrobin@betterobin.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram or Twitter, and I always look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, and let's get off to a great year. Dr. Bette Robin. Please subscribe on iTunes so we can get better and better at helping you make your practice dreams come true.